Hi there, everybody, and welcome to my internet TV show, Talkin Bout the Movies. This is episode S, where we talk about the new Star Trek movie called... I don't have a funny title for it, but it was called the new Star Trek movie. With me, of course, is DJ Nate C, partner in crime, and we both have seen the new Star Trek movie. Nate, what did you think about Star Trek Beyond?
The day I saw Star Trek Beyond, it was the best thing that happened to me that day.
You're gonna have to talk way louder than that.
I thought, at first, it was awful. I was really unhappy with the way the movie began, and it was not until they made it to the planet that it became a satisfying, adventurous Star Trek film for me. I was very little faith in the beginning, and I was rewarded with a largely entertaining Star Trek movie.
I agree that, in short, quote-unquote, for all its flaws, I enjoyed watching this movie very much, period. The biggest problem with this movie was the director, for sure. We're going to have a lot more to say about what's happening, but I was telling James about this too. In the first two New School Star Trek movies, the opening scene was always this thrilling, exhilarating, and exhausting opening, and then it always went dun, 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 and you would see Star Trek, and it was like boo, 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 oh my fucking god.
It's the James Bond approach, and they fumbled it on this one.
Yes, this movie, like many modern movies, doesn't have any fucking opening titles, which is infuriating to me when you don't have a title for your movie. And the opening of this film, as you say, is distinctly devoid of momentum or impetus of any kind.
It's a gag. It's one gag, and I think it was a good gag, but that is not a gag that rewards that many minutes of film time, especially when the opening acts of the first two films were so strong.
I agree, and I also strongly feel that, and the hallmark of this film seems to be that very good ideas are constantly mishandled, not so poorly that it makes for a terrible movie, but bad enough where I am constantly thinking, oh man, that was a great idea or a great concept. Too bad they kind of fucked it up by doing it this way. Case in point, let's get right into the big spoiler about who the bad guy is. Okay, for the majority of the film, I was completely lost because I had no idea who the bad dude really was, what he actually wanted, why he was working so hard to get that, and what he was going to do once he got there. Once they got back to the big star base, which I thought was cool, once they got back there and you found out that A, he was really the captain of that ship who had been B, mutated by all that extremely dangerous forbidden planet shit, which C, drove him crazy, and then D, he killed his own crew and built them into a bunch of robot slaves to E, further that mission of madness. That's really cool Star Trek shit going on right there. This whole movie is full of really cool Star Trek shit. This movie feels the most like a real episode of old school Star Trek, but at the same time, the majority of things in it are not necessarily incompetently handled, but they are handled incorrectly by this guy who is directing the movie. You could have had... There's a lot to say, and there's a lot of storytelling to be had in the idea of this noble captain driven mad by, his mission, like, let's boldly go. He definitely did, bit off more than he could chew. Well, that's the risk you take when you wear the badge, He got fucked and became a big problem. Some of the best episodes of the original series are exactly that right there, There's great stuff to be had in that. And, there's bits and pieces of great stuff happening with that storyline here, but again, since they don't tell you anything about that until literally 14 minutes before the end of the movie, when he says, literally, I was a former Starfleet captain of this ship until I went crazy on this alien planet, and now I'm coming for you, Jimmy T. Kirk, you! I was like, oh, that's what you're fucking doing here. So I liked the movie a lot more once I figured that out, but I had to sit through an hour of them riding motorcycles on the desert planet for apparently no reason until I got to that point.
I knew that the traitorous alien woman was a traitor the first time they showed her.
Oh, hell yes.
Yeah.
I'm surprised they even let her get that far in the first place, you know. Jimmy T. Kirk's gonna buy that hook, line, and sinker, but you know what? In old school Star Trek, they did exactly that sort of thing too, and again, this movie, I really, really liked how, unlike the first two, this one actually felt like it was fucking Star Trek. Let's go to a wacky planet and do shit.
It also is when they're that age. Like, they are actually on that 5-year mission now, so it is meant to match that tone and timeline more closely than ever before.
Well, I love the first two movies, yeah, but I disliked, you didn't need to have two crazy prequels. Like, you barely needed to have one entire prequel that reestablished everybody. Thank God they did such a good job with it. But finally, they actually do movie when they're on the 5-year mission. When the first movie was going to come out, I expected it to be this. Like, we already know who everybody is. Like, you didn't have to do that. But it was totally fun. Like, I'm okay with it. It was great.
The character development are some of the best moments in the first two films, I think.
That is one of the weakest parts of the third film as well. There's a ton of jokes and riffing, but these characters, I like what's happening, and yeah, it's Jimmy T. Kirk, little Mr. Spock, the crusty doctor, everybody's there, but they're just doing it for another week's adventure. Like in this week's episode, we're stuck on the planet this week, let's tell some jokes, we'll shoot some shit, okay. Now, again, I'm going to keep coming back to this. Compared to what the tone and the point of the first two movies have been, I still found this to be extraordinarily refreshing and entertaining despite all of these things that we're talking about. Yeah, for sure, I would have fixed all that shit, but it just didn't bug me that much. It really didn't. I was having a pretty fucking good time. Let's talk about blowing up the ship for a while.
Okay, I have a thought about that.
Okay. See you later, everybody. That was a great show.
We've seen the Enterprise eat shit before, so this is not an original presentation. However, what saved that for me entirely is that after the Enterprise wrecks, they still spend a lot of the movie on the Enterprise and benefiting from the Enterprise, which continues it as a location and as the heart of the story. And I thought that was one of the most brilliant things they did in that entire film.
I agree, and to that, please allow me to add this. One, God damn it, this Enterprise was actually a pretty cool one. Like, I didn't think I would like it as much as I ended up liking it. The main issue with blowing it up right now is, even though it's been around for 8 years, we still have not really been emotionally attached to it. So seeing it blow up, while lame, I didn't really feel it was explicitly necessary to have to do that. Okay, having said that, and seeing in the trailer they were going to blow it up, I found that I was very, very entertained by the entire sequence, which was actually like a good 35 minutes of the movie was the ship blowing up. I thought it was pretty fucking cool. I thought there was a lot of fun in it. In the first two movies, the Enterprise suffers crazy damage, and the gravity always gets turned off, and people get sucked out of the hull, and that was always cool, but there was something different about the tone of this one that I just really liked watching it happen. There was, I don't really think that I felt any real danger, because you know they're not going to glass the whole crew. Everybody's going to be fine, and they're going to get on the planet, but I definitely liked seeing what was happening, and they did some really cool shit, like separating the saucer, showing you the conduit where they separated the saucer, like the emergency saucer separation while shooting dudes in the face is really cool.
The season where Uhura and Krall go tumbling away in the next section.
Oh, that was
fucking amazing.
So there was a lot of really, really good shit there. I liked Scotty, the chief engineer, of course, would at the last minute rig a photon torpedo and grab an iPad to fly himself onto the planet. That was a cool idea. But on the other hand, Starfleet's flagship, the biggest, most powerful ship, is going to immediately get wasted by whatever this unexplained alien shit is. If it's that good, you need to tell me why it's that good. Mm-hmm. But, again, the evil bad guy was a Starfleet captain who had been listening in on your subspace shit for a century, so okay. But telling me that at the very, very end isn't good enough. You have to either build a mystery or clue him in or make me wonder and be engaged in that question. That was not happening in this.
I think that in the other two films, the villains were too easily conquered every single time. It seemed like they were never scary or effective. And in this movie, they immediately put in a villain that was wrecking them. And I really appreciate that they raised the stakes that much. However, in the earlier films, they get their asses beat a lot more. And in this one, they seemed more heroic and upbeat and fucking making it happen. The chemistry between all the lead characters, which ironically are like the only ones that survive on the entire Enterprise, which I think is really funny. There's a great scene where Kirk and two red shirts run down a hallway and the red shirt guys get wasted immediately.
Yeah.
Like, it takes... That whole gag is set up in like 2 seconds. I really appreciated that. And the same with... There's a scene towards the end of the film where they're like together as an ensemble figuring out a plan, like in conversation.
Right.
It unfolds where like each of them has an idea that leads to the next, to the next, to the next. And it was like basically an entire episode of Star Trek in about 12 seconds. And
right.
I really liked the way that was handled. It was pretty much like, yeah, it's pop, but it's perfect.
And again, that is so true to the original series.
Yeah.
And that is exactly the tone and the character mechanic, you know, that we did not see in the first two movies. And I find that the existence of that dynamic alone makes up for so much in this particular installment. It really does.
They heard so much about how much people liked the original Wrath of Khan that they decided Gonzo Star Trek, that's what people want.
They shouldn't have fucked with Wrath of Khan. Wait, that's already been done.
I'm talking about in vibe rather than in story.
I was seeing the trailers and the Enterprise is getting blown up, and I was like, wow, they're really blowing up the fucking ship, huh? And I said, if I sit through this whole movie and they don't show me the new Enterprise, I'm gonna be fucking pissed. And the third scene of the movie has Jimmy T. Kirk in his new boss's office on the starbase, and he's like, oh, what's going on over here on the starbase? And she's like, oh yeah, we're building this new starship, but it's not quite done yet. And I was like, oh, that's that shit. They better show me that shit. And so at the very end of the movie, they show you that shit. And so I thought it was cool that they are staying true. You know, there's a lot of callbacks to old school Star Trek in this movie. Like I was saying, one of them is they build the Enterprise A after they blow up the original to do a bunch of shit. And they're like, here's your new shit. I hope that ship is cool. We'll have to wait like 4 years to find out. But that was cool. There's also a bunch of really good original series jokes in here. Scotty mentions that the USS Franklin may have been captured by Romulans. It may have been disappeared in the nebula. It may have been taken by a giant green hand. I loved that.
I loved the Franklin. Everything about the Franklin was kick-ass. And to me, that's worth a whole other ship. The fact that they lost the Enterprise, used the Enterprise's carcass, and then took the Franklin back to fucking victory was, I mean, that's like classic movie making. That's like a movie from the 50s or something. It's like...
Yes, the Franklin was cool, and I am famous for thinking that Enterprise basically sucked, even though Enterprise was like the 50s of Starfleet, quote unquote. But the Franklin, like, I really liked this era, and like the Kelvin in the first one, like that older school era of Starfleet is really sweet. Like, I like the Franklin. I basically liked everything about it, like you said. I like the uniforms.
What ship do they have on the Enterprise show?
It was the Enterprise NX-01. It was a Columbia class, I think. One of you dorks on the internet will contradict me if I'm wrong, but I know I'm right. But Enterprise makes me so fucking mad because let's make a new Star Trek show that contradicts everything that you know about Star Trek. Oh, Jimmy T. Kirk wasn't the first guy to do all this shit. It was actually Scotty Bakula, and it wasn't Scotty Bakula's fault. He was a good actor. The performances in that show were good. But the story was so whack. It's like, you didn't meet the Klingons back then because you've already said that the Klingons did this and that. Furthermore, it wasn't the long-haired face appliance Klingons that we started seeing in 79. It should have still been the 60s Klingons with the fucking gold shirts and the fucking crew cuts. None of that shit makes any sense. I was not able to accept it, and I thought that it was discrediting, you know, all the hard work of Star Trek storytelling that came before it. If you're gonna do that, just fucking reboot the universe. Like, that's what everybody else does, and that's what they did in the movies, and it fucking works. You can do literally anything you want with old school Star Trek, just have it be in a different universe, and it's totally fine. I will buy anything you want to do because it's in a different universe, you know? One of my favorite old school episodes of Star Trek is Mirror Mirror. They go to a mirror universe, and they fucking kill people and fuck shit up. None of it matters, because it's a different fucking universe. And it's even better when they go back in Deep Space Nine, because they get to fuck with shit even more, but at the end of the day, you get to come back home and roll the credits, and it's fine. So that gives you that freedom and those opportunities to literally do whatever you want to with that format, you know? And so when you do something that is explicitly in the quote-unquote A canon, and it's like, oh, Captain Kirk didn't fight the first Andorian assassin on the Enterprise when Spock's dad was having problems with him. It was really Scott Bakula's engineer friend who did it, because, blah, blah, you know, that doesn't make any sense. There's another stupid episode of Enterprise that's the quote-unquote introduction of the Ferengi, and the Ferengi try to take over the Enterprise and all this shit. And I think the Borg show up once or twice. Well, if they showed up back then, why the fuck did they never mention them in the original series? If they showed up in Enterprise, why did Q snap his fingers and force fucking the JLP and his boys to meet them for the first fucking time? It just doesn't make any sense. So, when you do that stuff, fuck you. That's why I like these movies so much, because it doesn't do that. It starts its own universe where everybody's going out with everybody else and everybody who's left over is now gay, but it's totally fine because you're not fucking with anything that's been established. You can do anything you want.
Spock gets a photo from the old movies.
Yeah, that's okay because he got that from the Prime universe.
I love that.
And you know, that's usually the sort of thing that would upset me and that I would call bullshit on, but the way they handled that in the first two movies was pretty okay, and it sucks that he's passed away now, but I thought that those were the character moments that made me feel the most in this movie. And when he looked at the picture of them, even though that was from Star Trek V, that movie sucked, I was still like, oh, it's the real homeboys, you know?
Yeah.
But you know what? I've just been watching the real homeboys because it feels like Star Trek to me. I accept these people as being, you know, equivalent to the old school homeboys as well. Like, I like the job that they do and how they do it.
How about the device that holds the photo?
Okay, so the device that holds the photo now is way better than the JLP's stupid fucking holographic photo album where the shit was on lenticular baseball cards but still glued onto 600-year-old French paper, okay? Yeah. So, whatever. Remember in The Last Starfighter when Greg held up his fucking photo thing of his lizard family's photos and it was like, and it showed you all these photos of his family on this little panel? And then fucking Alex gets out, like, his shitty wallet, and Greg's like, what's that? And he's like, oh, it's my wallet. And he's got, like, his 3 photos on it. You can't fall asleep yet. We're only, like, a third of the way done talking about this movie. Okay, so, I don't think we're done talking about the ships. No, we're not. There's a couple things I want to say about the ships some more. So, you're right. I liked how the Enterprise blew up, but it was important that they got back there because she had important jobs left to do, and so she still got a lot of screen time that was good. 2 things that kind of bugged me. 1, they blow up the deflector dish. and Sulu says, "We can't raise the shields, the dish is blown up." That dish is not responsible for generating the shields. That is the navigational deflector dish. The navigational deflector throws up like a wall in front of the ship that keeps asteroids and shit from ripping giant holes in the hull. The shield grid is generated by a bunch of tiny shield emitters all around the ship. Remember in Star Trek 2 when they pushed the button, it went around the diagrams of the ship? Just nod your head and say yes. Okay? That signifies all the shield emitters coming alive and forming the shield grid. Like, you knock out a couple emitters, a part of the grid will fall out. Okay. In Next Generation, it was a little different. Like, no matter what, they were able to form, like, one grid, and it would go from 100% to 0%, depending on how many Romulans were there that week. Okay. So, when you blow up that big dish in the center, like, I'm pretty sure they would have been able to have some of the shields left. Okay. The other thing that bummed me out was, even though at the very end Jimmy T. Kirk gave a toast to the fallen Enterprise, that just wasn't really good enough. There should have been a little more commemoration and a little more emotion invested in remembering your ride that had been your home for so many years, that had been through a lot with you guys,
or
you
the
know.
hundreds of crewmen that died.
Oh, that's the other thing.
Come on, I mean, like, there's no way they would be reveling the way they are in that movie if so many people died.
So, and we got to talk about Jimmy T. Kirk's birthday and his dad and the motorcycle, too. We'll get to that. But first, the Enterprise holds about 4,000 people in this universe. We know that the Enterprise in this version of Star Trek is slightly larger than the Enterprise D is, okay? It's slightly larger than Galaxy
But
Class
on a
Starship.
rescue mission, they might not necessarily stock it with people. If they probably would need to leave space for refugees.
They were not on a rescue mission. They had just stopped at the starbase to get supplies. They were halfway through the 5-year mission, so the ship had a full fucking complement of people. There were 4,000 people on that ship, okay? The majority of them were taken intact by Krall to the planet to get fucked with it for whatever, okay?
Well, we only saw, 30 of them escape.
But we only see, we saw more than 30 of them on screen. There was big lines of them being taken to the mines and shit, okay?
In, but not out.
Here's what... Quit interrupting me. Here's what my question is. Here's what's really going on. Okay, more people from the Enterprise survived than would have actually fit on board the Franklin. Much less... Like, the Franklin's a heavy ship, and they had to start it from a dead stall by plopping it off a mountain and then boosting it from 0.
I don't think that makes any scientific sense whatsoever. It's just a cool movie thing.
Okay, fine. And I mean, I bought it then too, and I was like, oh, I hope Sulu gets the ship started! Oh my god! Okay. But still, there's 4,000 people on the Enterprise. The Franklin doesn't even have an engineering section. They should have said, Captain's log, we went back to get the other 2,000 people. That's all you had to do to set that shit up. This movie constantly does that thing to you, where they leave out one tiny, crucial piece of exposition that, while it may not satisfy your curiosity, will at least keep you from being bothered by it for the next 20 minutes of phaser shooting and shit blowing up. I liked all the phaser shooting and shit blowing up. I thought it was fine.
It's because in Fast and Furious you don't hold people's hand because it doesn't take any brain cells to watch that movie. He made 4 of them.
I hate those movies. I still like this movie. This movie was helped out because Simon Pegg had a lot to do with writing it, and so I think that, part of the reason why it feels so much like Star Trek and why it's so fun to watch and there's so many little character jokes and bits is because of him. He put in all the jokes. He made sure that it all worked, Star Trek-y wise. Gotta hand it to him for doing that. I thought that was good.
And the cast they have an ensemble.
Oh, yeah, the cast is great.
They're so good together that they can pretty much... I mean... It really felt like the same as the other 2 movies, except it was as if every single character had a headache or was on their period or something. There was something just really out of step. But, it was there, it was them, just not on their best day.
Right, and this movie was totally about that. They got caught with their britches down,
Yeah.
and their best tool, their advantage is gone. All they have are their balls and their word. This that's a story beat you've seen before. This movie is constructed of nothing but of beats that you've seen in earlier Star Treks.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I found a lot of comfort in seeing that. That's what it keeps coming down to, is no matter what, at the end, this is good Star Trek fun.
Yeah.
For sure. The scenes that I thought I would dislike the most or be instantly turned off by, I found enjoying the most, such as, let's play the Beastie Boys while we surf our starships on the nebula above. Nate's eyes are rolling into the back of his head, and his head is like rolling. I thought that was going to be horrible, and I was like, what the fuck is going on in Star Trek? And I was like, you know what? This actually isn't so bad. And then Spock is like, is this classical music? And Dr. McCoy's like, yes, I think it is. And I was like, alright, fuck it. Why the fuck not? I actually found myself genuinely laughing in spite of, I shouldn't have liked that, but I did.
I think it's a fine gag. My disappointment was that they had already used that song in another movie, and it seemed cheap and lazy to use the same song again. Like when they played Public Enemy earlier in the film, I was like,
That's tight.
I'm down with that. I think that's a good joke. I think it's a good song.
That was tight.
And I think that's a good Beastie Boys song, but we've already heard it in these movies, and it seems like a waste of space, and like, to me it's the same as having a Death Star every other movie. It's
Right.
like, okay, yeah, that works, but Jesus Christ, why couldn't... There's a million songs in the world. But it worked for the scene. It was edited well. It's a good song. Like, it was okay. It
Right.
seemed lazy and kind of numbingly, like, OCD to me, or, like, ADD, rather. Like, yep, this is comforting. We're going to not only tie them into the old series, but we're going to tie them into shit that they saw 2 years ago.
Again, I think that there's sabotage. It's Kirk's birthday. He's the same age that his dad was. There's the thing about the motorcycle, but they set up the birthday, then they don't talk about it at all. Then he's like, oh, there's this motorcycle, but they don't really establish the emotional weight of his dad and what riding that motorcycle means to Kirk and what persevering and saving people using that vehicle means to him. That would have made that scene mean something. You would have been like, oh, well. And again, using sabotage was a chance to... Kirk is in a lull. It's not his midlife crisis, but he's always been on top. Even at his lowest point, he's always been on top. When they play that song, and, him and his crew are about to come back up on top, they've used the old gear to fucking get the drop on him. They could have really driven that home, and all of these things could have been connected. It was one really big thread that is being looked at, but again... The director fails to strongly connect the dots and bring you along with that. He fails to keep you invested in that chain of events and that chain of emotions. And so...
You think he was given a list of things he had to get in there?
I think he was like, they were like, hey, you want to direct this movie? And he was like, sure, I need money. I don't think he knows Star Trek, but Simon Pegg does. Because if he knew Star Trek, this movie would have had... a lot more to do with, what happens when you have to confront yourself in the middle of nowhere and it changes you into something terrible. Like, that's what it would have been about. And all these things were there. It's just that he doesn't tell you about it until the very fucking end. So you have to go back and watch the movie again, knowing what it's about, to really get that. And you have to use your imagination to mine that story material for yourself, which can be challenging and rewarding for a smart guy like me, but most of you are totally fucked, And if you're directing a movie and you choose to do that, then you suck because you're playing with your audience. If you're directing that movie and you fail to do that, you suck because you're not doing justice to the material that you've been given.
All right, here's what I think. The beginning didn't work for me because they're trying in a really short time to show Kirk and Spock's mutual disillusionment with being in Starfleet.
Mm-hmm.
It seems rushed and fumbled and unconvincing and not worthy of the weight it's given later in the movie.
Agree.
But what I think happened is that probably all that stuff was filmed at great length, and then it was the first stuff that was cut from the film in order to get it down to a 2-hour and 2-minute running time, which these days is pretty tight for a movie of that kind of blockbuster status. So I feel pretty convinced that I don't know if it's Batman versus Superman level, but I think that...
I was really hoping that you weren't going to mention that in my Star Trek review, so...
But that got reissued with a different cut that people are excited about, that the filmmakers are happier about. And
you're still talking about it.
Yeah. Well...
Did you see that?
I have not seen it yet, but
okay.
I have high hopes for it.
Look forward to our review of that coming never. I heard people talking about it, though. I can't watch it again, but I want to hear what you think about the long version.
I'll check it out at some point. But the bottom line is, I think that this Star Trek movie very likely has 20 more minutes to it that would make it a better film and more holistic, and I have a feeling that they were like, this is the Fast and the Furious, dude. We've got to pare it down to the bone and keep it moving and keep it action-packed. And I think that we lose some things along the way that do explain some of the things that we're left to guess about. Like, they probably cut it so hard that they lost track of what information people needed, or decided that people don't even care as long as things are blowing up, you know?
If that's what they're doing, then they shouldn't be making movies in the first place. That's exactly what you shouldn't be doing when you make a movie.
Except it's going to be profitable, right?
I think it's already made more money than, like, Ghostbusters had,
yeah.
you know? Oh man, the other thing I was going to say about all of those things, yes, you're right.
I don't think that's true, though. I think Ghostbusters has made more money still to this point. I saw a $59 million opening weekend for Star Trek, and I saw that Ghostbusters is at 135 and about to go towards the world market because it hasn't quite broken even yet, but they think it will once it goes worldwide.
Okay. Shit, what was I about to say about Star Trek? Oh, yeah, so we think there might be a longer version. I would, of course, watch a longer version of that on Blu-ray. We know that it was in the news that they had gone back and reshot all the stuff with Kirk and his Admiral boss in her office. That was done after main production, and...
Why did they change that?
Not sure why, but pretty sure because of the untimely accidental death of Anton Yelchin, who plays Chekhov.
Mm-hmm.
It's obvious in the movie that they had to re-edit it to make sure that his role was tastefully presented and there was absolutely nothing weird or wacky happening with him or his character.
He doesn't do much in the movie.
I think he had done more, you know, and usually he gets a bunch of jokes and they kind of make fun of how he's from Russia and stuff like that. So he was, you know, dignified to the point of being whitewashed in this movie.
You're right. I think you're right.
Definitely felt that, and at the end it said, you know, dedicated for Leonard Nimoy, and then it said for Anton right at the end, and I was pissed because it said for Leonard Nimoy, and some guy was like, nah! In the back of the theater, and I wanted to run up the stairs and punch him in the face, and then some other dude blew a raspberry when it said for Anton, and I was like, why are you guys here at the movie theater? Like, fucking why?
It's a public place, scum are allowed.
What's that?
It's a public place, and scum are allowed.
Yeah, that's true.
It's terrible.
How about that, the remodeled theater?
On the bonus side, I think that's probably the most comfortable theater experience I've ever had. The new reclining, overstuffed chairs are incredible.
I like those a lot.
We bought in advance and got the front row of the seats above the handicap section, which was for 3D, was a really good placement. I was disappointed when I got there to find that people had crowded on... Even though the theater was like half full, people had bought all the seats on either side of us.
That's what happened to me too.
Yeah. So...
I was pissed.
It was kind of I mean, we had the two best seats, and those are certainly not the close quarters that we're used to in a movie theater.
Right.
But it did feel like it diminished the experience a little bit that we had to share that luxury with other people. Although... Luckily, once the movie started, they were serious about watching it. Like, they were rustling around in advance and making me nervous.
Right.
But once the movie started, they were there to see it, and so it ended up being fine.
Give me the 3D report. What sayest thou about the 3D?
The 3D was tasteful, it looked nice, and it was completely superfluous and unnecessary. Like,
Okay.
there were some scenes where it was like great depth, beautiful shot, but there was no gags with it. It was never overblown. It was, it was adequate. It looked good. It was very tastefully used, I thought, but not in a way that made it seem like essential.
Word. Let's talk about the guest stars for a minute. We haven't covered them yet. I pretty much liked all the guest stars. I thought the acting was uniformly very good. I liked the white-faced alien girl. She had a lot of good jokes.
Shayla is a worthy new character,
yeah.
I think. Like, her performance and her character, I mean, she definitely starts out of the gate kicking a lot of ass.
Right.
But the rest of the crew is at this high level at this point, too, where everyone's kicking ass. So you can't bring in, like, a weak character in the course of a movie. It has to be a character that's on their par. But anyway.
She had a good rapport with Scotty, and it's rare to see an engineer guest star character anyway, so I thought all of those things worked in the favor of entertaining me as a member of the audience. I liked what was happening. And I liked when she said, "Don't break my beats," or whatever, when they were fucking with her boombox. That was good, too. I liked Idris Elba as the bad guy. He was cool. It wasn't his fault. I had no idea what his problem was. Like, I really liked him whenever he was on screen. I really liked his fucking green-faced robot henchman homeboys who said, none of them ever said a fucking word. All they did was kill dudes. It was super cool. I liked them. And I liked, the traitor alien girl guest star was cool. It should have been hilarious and scary when the Enterprise's saucer falls on her and kills her, but again, the director fails to make that moment really resonate with me.
Yeah.
I was like, she got killed by the saucer, and I felt worse for the Enterprise than I did for her.
Yes.
I mean, she deserved it anyway, but
it was Wizard of Oz style.
Yeah, and traitors in Star Trek movies deserve cooler deaths than that. Remember Captain Trell in Star Trek 2? He fucking killed himself, dude, when the thing was coming out of his fucking ear. That was awesome. So
I liked that they hid the device in the ensign woman's
that was a good gag.
Protrusions. I didn't see that coming.
I didn't
until
either.
It happened, and I was pretty amused by that. And then I also liked that she failed them, which did save Sulu. However, she gets wasted for it. Just absolutely obliterated.
That was the point of the movie where I was so confused about the chip that turned on the bioweapon and what was Krall doing and who it was. And I was like, did she get derezed, or is that like a particle beam or what? And then Uhura's face was like, oh, that killed her. And then I was like, okay, why? And then an hour later I was like, oh, wow, she got fucked up. But it did save Sulu, so it made sense then. I've only seen this once, but now that, once you find out what's going on, I think the second viewing of this movie will be much more rewarding and enriching for the audience member. Especially someone who actually cares about what the fuck is happening from a story perspective, as well as people who are actual Star Trek fans, because there's obviously so many Easter eggs and in-jokes here that repeated viewings are warranted, even on a casual level, because you're going to keep getting a bunch of new jokes and things that you missed the first time.
It seemed like it had some Indiana Jones 3 energy to it. Like, once they get to their location, the pace really takes off quite a bit.
It's all shenanigans for sure, but it's still pretty serious shenanigans. Even though there's a lot of comedy, I was never turned off by the comedy. It's like, oh, stop it with the jokes, because in Star Trek it's all shenanigans, and it's like, get the girl, make the jokes, arch your eyebrow, beam him up.
I'm a doctor, not a, and then he transports away.
He was about to say, I'm a doctor, not a fucking something or other, and while he was in the middle of saying the F word, they beamed him out. That was good. And they were true to the characters. Like McCoy's weirded out by them beaming him up, and furthermore, they used the ancient cargo transporter that they never should have used on him in the first place. That was
I love
great.
That. Yeah, he was like, "Oh, It's only for cargo. I could do 20 at a time. That was one of my favorite parts. I'm like, okay, man.
Yeah, the ancient ass Franklin is gonna have enough power to run the modified transporter beam to beam everybody from the Enterprise onto the Franklin. I was like, whatever. Carl Urban, again, I think he's like my favorite actor of this generation.
Yeah,
he's
amazing.
great as Bones. Every time he's on that movie, he lights up the fucking screen. Yeah. Everything he does, it's great. Him and Spock, you know, the chemistry is there. Like, he's just great in that role, as is everybody who is part of the bridge crew. Like, everybody's great in that.
They all kick ass.
Even though they might be a little different, they're just fucking great. I also gotta say, watching the trailers, I was surprised at how interesting that fucking Jack Reacher shit looked to me. They're based on books, so I was like, okay, but James and I were like, wow, what is this? And I was like, okay, well, you know, I gotta say, the trailer for that actually looked pretty fucking good, so maybe I'll go watch that one too.
What are the names of those other movies?
Well, the first one was just called Jack Reacher, and this one is called Jack Reacher something or other. I know they're books. He's some army dude who just drifts and helps people out, but they looked really good. The first one got good reviews. I never saw it, but I just remember being impressed by that trailer.
You have more patience with Tom Cruise than I do.
Dude, I'm still gonna make you watch that Powered Armor movie he was in because it was awesome.
I don't even like Legend that much.
And, well, I tried to watch Legend recently after discussing that with you, and I watched like 10 minutes of it, and I was like, sorry, Ridley, I can't watch this movie, so I'm with you with that. I'm gonna make you watch Edge of Tomorrow, and for you guys listening out there, Nate has never seen The Godfather or The Godfather Part 2, so we're gonna be doing that at some point this year, and we're gonna have a special episode of Talking About the Movies called Talking About the Movies, Episode G, quote, so, you've never seen The Godfather, unquote. Please look forward to that coming soon at some point this year whenever we get around to doing that.
I think Episode G should be Ghoulies.
That's one of my favorite movie posters of all time, because he's just sitting in the fucking toilet. Okay.
Whatever, Godfather, whatever, let's watch Ghoulies.
I'll watch Ghoulies with you fine, but you still have to watch The Godfather.
I actually like Spookies better than Ghoulies.
I haven't seen Spookies.
Oh, really?
No, I don't know anything about Spookies.
It's an interesting story. You'll have to read up on it, because it's two movies that got stitched together by different Hollywood people under the worst circumstances and then put out as a horror movie.
Right.
But it's fucking amazing.
Okay, I think we're getting close to the end of our Star Trek discussion here. Is there anything else big that we left out?
I heard Chris Hemsworth is coming back as Kirk's dad in the fourth film.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. I like that. I'm glad that another one is coming out, because even though I like what's been happening, I still think that they can go further and really deliver to me a super home run old school Star Trek movie, you know, like... They're doing a good job, but I always want to see more as long as it's good. Let's also talk about the new TV show for a second, too, but we'll get back to that in a second.
I have a movie question.
Yes.
Okay, how do you feel about... In the original series, you have the first interracial kiss between Kirk and Uhura.
Sure.
But they shied away from it. They don't actually show it. They cut the scene where their lips actually touch, so they show it from behind Shatner's head. It's implied, but it's not actually shown, and
I think you actually see it. I've got the Blu-ray so we can check. I think you see it now, maybe.
That's my understanding, is that it was filmed but not quite shown on TV. Maybe it's on the Blu-rays, but whether that was broadcast on TV, yeah, there is a statistic about that. I felt like it was a bummer that they filmed a Sulu and husband kiss in this movie, but that also did not make it to the theater.
Right. Maybe that will make it on Blu-ray. I obviously have no problem with that sort of thing, and who knows why it was cut or whatever. I think there was more material with his husband or whatever that was cut too.
Yeah.
But I just don't know.
I bet that's going to be in the long version as well. At least more stuff on them.
That's fine. I'm fine with seeing that.
Yeah.
I was bugged in the first movie when Spock was going out with Uhura. I was like, what the fuck for? And I still feel like that, you know, what the fuck for? It hasn't really ever been moving the stories forward, but the character stuff is really good, you know? And since it's in a parallel universe, like, it's fine. You can do whatever you want. I just don't really... You know, how are you going to get the Vulcan to go out with somebody? Like, Nurse Chapel had a permanent boner for Spock in the old school Star Trek, and he eventually knew it, but he still never allowed himself to get anywhere with that. So, if this version of Spock will allow himself to go forward with that, they just need to show me a little bit more of why. Like, we see more about Spock and who he is in these movies than we ever had before, and it's great. Like, I already totally get it. But I think that if they do that, you know, that it should, at least in one of these movies, drive the actual story forward as well. So it doesn't feel like, oh, let's have them go out with each other so we can have them bicker and do funny things while we don't have the plot moving forward. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but
I don't know if that feels...
the characters. I think having those more intense relationships makes them more potent characters. It makes their chemistry more dynamic. And I think it's just a better foundation point for them to be at. But they're also not hitting us over the head with it and showing us, like, date night.
That's true. It was really heavy in the first one, and in the second one they were mad at each other and they were fighting and it was funny, but whatever. And in this one it was really toned down. Yeah. I definitely was. I was like, oh, thank you for not, you know, throwing it in my face. But in the last one, it was hilarious when Kirk's like, are you two fighting? But they're busy getting chased by all the Klingon birds of prey. Yeah, totally.
That's a great line.
Totally. So it was all good, but in this one, you know, it was more to the side. And again, in line with, you know, the more episodic, you know, slightly, you know, lighter, more easygoing overall tone of this film, you know, it all worked, and I took it a lot easier than I have in past
There's the
films.
scene where I think it's the captain sort of reminiscing frankly about the relationships of the crew. There's the woman that goes out and throws the guy out of a room and throws his shirt at him.
That was Chekhov, I think.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, that was Chekhov. Pushed Chekhov out. He's like, oh, and she throws his shirt out with him. Totally, that was him.
I missed that it was him. But anyway, I kind of like that scene. It reminded me of something that should have happened in the original series, but what wasn't shown or got cut out.
Yeah.
Like, it had an old school vibe, but it was kind of...
In The Cage and, like, The Man Trap and maybe the episode after that, you saw a few shots of like, a guy and his girlfriend wearing, like, civilian, like, beach party clothes, and they would be walking around the ship on their day off, you know, showing that, like in the Enterprise D, there were civilians and that you could have relationships on the ship and that it was okay even though this is a paramilitary organization or whatever. So I definitely like that in this one, too. Another thing that I liked is that they didn't have the fucking bunny suit mini skirts for the chicks. They all had the pantaloon types. Did you notice that?
There was a lot of interesting costumes and uniforms in this movie. The sort of like Civil War looking, or was it Revolution?
On the Franklin? Yeah.
Kind of Sergeant Pepper's looking shit.
That stuff was cool. And it was all one piece, like, onesie suits with, like, integrated boots and, like, the super military stuff as compared to the more, like, collegiate or, like, academic Starfleet stuff.
I felt like there was some nods to Star Trek V in that way.
Oh, for sure. Like, well, that picture Spock had was from Star Trek V. Yeah. And then, the planet,
the way the planet felt at times, whenever they'd get to a kind of wooded, mountainous area, it reminded me of that, too.
I wonder where they filmed it. I wonder if they filmed it, like, in the Midwest, or if it was filmed in California, or if that was all digital ILM backlot shit. I have no idea.
I don't know.
The planet they went to at the opening of the last one, the red and white volcano planet, that was a crazy fucking trip to be on. Like, that looked crazy.
I love that scene. It's amazing.
It was so cool.
The making of that scene is really cool that's on that.
I haven't seen the making of that yet.
Yeah, there's a very good featurette about that scene that's worth watching.
The opening scene of this one was lame. The one good gag was the forced perspective when you thought the aliens were big, but they were really small. I loved it, but everything else was so hackneyed and tried. I was like, oh, fuck, no! But again, you know, that's totally the sort of shit that Jimmy T. Kirk would have done, or at least what you imagine Jimmy T. Kirk would have done, you know, when you don't see the episode that's on that week.
It plays into why he feel like he's wasting his time at that moment.
True.
I mean, it's meant to underscore that.
And again, they introduce the MacGuffin, the bioweapon chip there, but they don't do a good enough job of setting that up strongly enough to make you remember it, or fear it, or be curious as to its danger or purpose, which you would need to do.
Plus, the whole premise is that some guy spent like how many hundreds of years searching out those two pieces of it floating in space, and in the end it ends up being sent out of the atmosphere of a starbase in one piece, active, floating through space. And that's the resolution. They don't do anything about cleaning up what is considered one of the harshest weapons of all time that's never even been conceived of by the Federation and that has ruined civilizations. And they're like, it's cool, we shot it up into the atmosphere and beyond. So, whatever.
Right. There's a lot of little things like that that we said aren't explained. Also...
That's not little, though.
Yeah, that's a pretty big thing, actually. Krall has his android robot homeboys, but then he has the dude and the chick homeboys, too, that are real living people that both get killed. It's obvious that they were both his officers on the ship, but we never find out who they were, what they did. They needed to show us, like, in the logs, and he'd say, like, Lieutenant Shelby, Commander Kyle, or whatever. Is there an action figure
record of that?
No, there's no toys for this.
Really?
They had toys for the first new Star Trek movie, and they sold so poorly that was it. So I was smart, because that Enterprise now is like $90. I was smart to buy that. So
when bros start going to see Star Trek, the toys evaporate.
Fucking bros. So you mentioned that Chris Hemsworth is going to be in the new Star Trek. That's going to be cool. I think that's going to be cool. I liked him as George Kirk in the prologue to the first Star Trek. I liked what he did, and I liked the style and what they were doing. I'm not exactly sure what he's going to do here, but if they're really going to make Kirk and his dad a real hard story thing, they've got all the pieces to make it work. They just need to really fucking make it work as hard as fucking possible.
They're going to bring him back to do a sort of like Scrooge Ghost of Christmas Past thing. It's going to be the Christmas Star Trek movie.
If they do the generation shit where fucking Kirk's dad comes back through a space-time rift to help his son fight the fucking Romulans, I will throw my Diet Coke at the screen and run screaming out of the theater.
No, it's better. They go to a planet that's basically Fantasy Island, and a CGI Ricardo Montalban then takes them to the world you just described.
What if they remake Star Trek V and Spock's long-lost half-brother shows up and hijacks the Enterprise A and takes them to find the center of the universe, where it turns out that Kirk's dad's head is now God and lives inside the center of the universe, and then they just have all these stupid shenanigans about
and Spock's half-brother is actually Legolas.
Who would play Spock's half-brother in the remake of Star Trek V? Would it be Orlando Bloom?
That's what I'm saying.
That guy?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Well, I mean, it's only his face. They just grafted onto a CGI elf body.
That movie.
He would
was
rarely
so
walk
terrible.
himself. He would usually be riding some 3D CGI steed that looks fake.
Dude, the new Star Trek Beyond was like 1,000 million times better than any of the 3 Hobbit movies were.
Yeah, they're not comparable.
Easily.
That's like saying, this Hungry Man TV dinner is better than that bag of Alpo.
Hungry Man TV dinners are pretty dope, actually.
That's what I'm saying, in comparison to...
I've never had Alpo, so don't really know. Well, if we're talking about dog food and The Hobbit, folks, I guess we're done talking about Star Trek. Is there anything else crucial that we need to add to Star Trek Beyond today?
The music was good?
Yeah, the music is always as good. The theme song and the overall, that theme and all the music styles and the leitmotifs that they devised for this entire series of Star Trek has been uniformly and undeniably excellent. I've thoroughly enjoyed all of the scores for all of these movies very much.
There was that new side view of warp space that I'd never seen before.
Oh yeah, that was good. That was cool. That was in the beginning too. It was like the weird hourglass sort of shit. That was good. We obviously don't really get to see the Enterprise do that much shit because it spends most of its time on screen either dying or being dead. In the last one and in the first one, we saw that it had a bunch of transforming parts when it would go to warp and do all this stuff. All the stuff on the bridge was cool. We actually got some pretty good glory shots of whatever the consoles were this time. They had upgraded them with new consoles, and there was all this touchscreen shit. I really liked the design of the Franklin, how it was all old school buttons with overlays on the view screens. One of the cool things that this new school Star Trek does is the view screens are actually windows, and then the consoles have those emitters that project all that shit onto the windows, like all the speedometers, the targeting, all that shit. That's a really cool idea. You know, they wanted to do that in the 60s, but they just weren't able to do that. They would occasionally show you graphics on that. In the 70s, they were able to do that pretty much with that style of graphics. I hope that with the new Enterprise A, we A, see more of it, but B, I just hope that we are able to emotionally connect more with the ship. Because even though the Enterprise is, like, unlike Kit or, like, some other, you know, talking alive spaceships, which are, you know, living characters in their own right.
Hal.
Right, totally. The Enterprise is still, like, one of the stars of the show and a very well-loved and well-regarded character in her own right. So, to continually build her image and then discard it in effigy just for the sake of building a new one, that's not doing justice to the character, you know? Like, that ship gives everything she's got.
It's a godless future.
Well, that's true, but it's cool because, you know, Starfleet proved that there is no God. Science defeated God. Science is God. You know, the Vulcans proved it too, because once they realized that science was God, everybody else who believes that science is God showed up and they formed the Federation of Planets. The Andorians felt the same way too. They're like, oh, you've gotten over all that tribe religion bullshit and the violence. Now you can actually join the real community of the universe, you know? So, but where this timeline is past that,
I thought it was just that they designed transwarp drive and the Vulcans showed up.
It wasn't transwarp drive, it was regular warp drive, but it was, they had to go past, like, warp 1.2, you know, because they had to be able to leave the solar system and go beyond it sustainably to come back. Vulcan is actually really close to Earth, I think. They're the closest, you know, civilized planet that could detect a warp signature. That movie, First Contact, was shite, it was crap. But all of this stuff is in it, and that is how it happened, you know. They're like, Earth is here, there's Alpha Centauri, and Vulcan is on, like, the other side of Alpha Centauri. So they detected it, and they came right over to see what was up, and they're like, oh, looks like you're in. And so it was Earth and Vulcan, and that's how Starfleet started, and then the Andorians got involved. And don't you dare tell me that Enterprise episodes told me about it, because I'm not fucking watching it, and don't tell me that I can read some stupid book about it, because I'm not reading that either. All that matters is the original series and the Next Generation and whatever else that I say matters. You guys got that? So, having established that...
I think it's incredible that you could have a show with so many different iterations and try to pretend to have a canon that makes it all hang together as one mythology. Like, it's all like a tapestry of ideas that overlay each other, but I think trying to have one timeline through all of that and hold it all consistent is unrealistic.
Well, you're right, but it was really easy to keep Star Trek sorted out until a certain point, which is basically Enterprise, because unlike Doctor Who, there was nothing like the unit dating controversy or any other wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey shit that directly contradicted it. But you can't really argue that stardates are fucked up because stardates have never meant anything ever, you know? They were just made up. In the Next Generation, way late in the game, they set a rule and stuck to it, but it didn't matter at that point either. So stardates don't matter. In this new version of Star Trek with the movies, it does, and it makes perfect sense. The stardate is 225654. The year is 2256, and it's the 54th day. It makes perfect fucking sense. They do that a lot. But all the stardates in the old shit, it doesn't fucking matter. We know that the Best of Both Worlds happens on Christmas Day, and we know that a couple other episodes take place on certain dates. We know that the Enterprise was probably launched in this year, and so on and so forth. But even though we didn't have the exact dates, we knew that all of the shit in the original series and the shit they talked about occurred before the 80s era of movies, and that occurred before the Next Generation. All of this shit worked with each other, and it all made sense and correlated with each other.
Except the cartoon.
The cartoon made sense too. That was written by all the same people, like that, and that's legit Star Trek canon as well.
I don't think anything ever wild happened there that you'd have to disavow. You're trying to
No,
hold.
no way. That's one of the best entries in all of Star Trek. Actually, I can't wait to show that to you either.
Yeah, I mean that's been since I was a kid that I saw that.
The James Tiberius Kirk. That's the first place you heard his name. That was the first appearance of the holodeck. There's a bunch of things that were established. Wow. You will meet Robert April, the first captain of the Enterprise, in that show. That show is great, and everything that happens in it is firmly established as being legitimate and authentic. And the shows that follow it have referenced directly, things that happen in that show, and have brought them out. So it's an official thing. Like, George Lucas didn't say, they've been wibbly wobbly on it, but people have generally accepted it because the people who wrote the live action show wrote it, and all the people who were in the show were on it except for Chekhov. Like, it's a real legitimate show. Mm-hmm. The reason why they made that show was because they realized that the ratings had been so good, but they had already canceled the show.
Why didn't they have Chekhov on the cartoon?
Because it cost them way too much. They made the show, and they decided to go balls out, and they paid everybody to come back and do the real voices, and they paid, like, DC Fontana and Larry Niven and David Gerald to come back and write more episodes. They spent all their money doing that, so they couldn't pay Chekhov to do the voice, but they did hire Walter Koenig to write and direct an episode of it, so he was able to get on the show that way. Cool. So it's a great show. The storytelling's top notch, and the voice acting is great, and it's all them, dude. They couldn't use the music either because it costs too much, so they had to make new music for the show. But it's good music too.
That's
it's good
cool
times.
To have. That's cool.
Definitely good times. So that's what's up with that. So
cool. Look forward to that.
I guess that's pretty much what.
What can they do for a fourth movie? What's the play that they have to make? Can they kill everybody?
No, they better not do that shit. So they've got the Enterprise A. Okay, all they really have to do is make a movie, quote unquote, just like this one, that is true to the style of the original series. That is an original series adventure that is on the 5-year mission.
It's the Galaxy Quest version.
Well, but they need to... The story needs to be extremely strong, it needs to... The core needs to be a human allegory, and that needs to be the focus, so you can be fucking constantly emotionally invested in what's happening. I love the action, I love everything that's going on, but I love Star Trek more than almost anything else, and for over an hour, I had no fucking clue what was happening, because not once did the director try to establish at all what type of motivation the bad guy had, any possible type of his history. I just didn't know who was doing what for what reason. Starfleet needs to get off the planet. Great. All of these other things are happening all the time, and it's really loud, and they're gonna do wheelies and shit. Holy fucking cow. But I just didn't understand. But as soon as he said, oh, that's my ship, I was the captain, I'm gonna fucking kill you because fuck Starfleet, I was like, why didn't you tell me that an hour ago? I really would have enjoyed what was happening so much more if I knew what the fuck was happening. All they have to do is that. Do the same thing, and give me more of that, please, thank you. Just let us fucking understand what people's motivations are, where they're coming from, and what the fuck they're after. It's called making fucking movies that tell people stories.
I think that even-numbered Star Trek movies in this franchise are going to mine the past, and we're going to get... The next one's going to be Save the Whales, or something we've absolutely seen before.
If they pull that Save the Whales shit, I will be pissed too.
It's going to be something... the way they brought back Khan, they're going to do that mistake again. That's what's going to happen. Jesus. It's going to be... I don't know which classic episode. It's going to be Kirk in a giant chess set or something, but we're going to have seen it.
I'm cool with them doing classic episodes. If they do the fucking Doomsday Machine, or if they do the Ultimate Computer, or if they go to the Nazi planet or the Roman planet.
It would be awesome if they did one
fucking awesome.
Yeah. Or all of those. Like, just make it like that. That would be
Those are
wonderful.
My favorite episodes.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what they need to do. The spirit of adventure. Every week you tune in, it's like, holy shit, what the hell's gonna happen to them? Like, this movie felt like that a lot, and that's what Star Trek needs to be about. if they fucking fly back to Earth and fight over San Francisco again, I'm so tired of that, and it's so dull.
Yeah.
You've got to go
Unless
out
they
in
show
space
my
and
shelf.
do shit. Right.
That's okay.
So, and Kirk's like, oh, I'm gonna have a birthday, like, it just needs to matter. You have to make it matter. Like, you have to write a script that makes it matter. You have to make it clear to us why it matters, and you have to tell it to us in a way that makes us care about why it matters. That's what you have to do.
What if they had, for the villain, Patrick Stewart?
That could be awesome if you do it correctly.
Yeah.
You know that Patrick Stewart can definitely make that happen. Like,
Yeah.
that would be easy for him, but you'd have to do it the right fucking way. I would probably try to handle that like Jeff Bridges as the bad guy in the first Iron Man.
Mm-hmm.
He's right there, plain as day, staring you in the face. I did not fucking recognize it was him until it said starring Jeff Bridges as the bad guy, and I said, oh my god, that was Jeff fucking Bridges.
Yeah.
If you can do that and get Patrick Stewart in there and sneak him in,
You can't
and
sneak
then...
Patrick Stewart into a fucking
I know, right?
Star Trek movie. That's impossible.
Well, you can sneak Tyler Perry into it, so, I mean, you could probably sneak... There's a bunch of wacky weirdos in the fucking new one. That dickhead who's fucking flying the X-Wing in the new Star Wars, the bearded fucko, is the guy who runs the starbase and calls Red Alert. Snap Wexley, the X-Wing pilot!
Poe Dameron?
Not Poe Dameron. Poe Dameron's dork friend, the other fat douchebag who flies the X-Wing in the shitty end part of that stupid movie. His name's Snap Wexley. Don't ask me how I know that shit. I just do.
Would you rather be named Dak or Snap Wexley?
I'm fine with Dak. I mean, Dak was cool, and he went out hard like a champion, dude.
Dak got like 3 seconds of screen time and then he died.
Yeah, but, I mean, he died, burning in the pure flame of the Galactic Empire. His
and then
death
he was crushed
sanctified.
by the foot of an AT-AT.
Dude, that was so ruthless, dude!
Yeah.
The Empire Strikes Back is the fucking best.
You don't have to bury somebody who gets crushed by an AT-AT.
Me and you need to watch the first Star Trek movie, motion picture too, on Blu-ray.
Yeah, that's awesome.
definitely.
It's the second best Star Trek movie after the first reboot.
Ladies and gentlemen, we gotta go now. I want to talk to you, buddy, off the mic. Thanks for listening, everybody. Oh, that was an hour and 6 minutes. I was just like the last one. That was pretty good. How do we, let's see. I think I have to turn this thing on to, I really liked the first new Star Trek was amazing. And when I went to see that, I was like, there's no way it can be that good. And I was like, holy shit, like, I loved it. The second one, for all of its fucking problems, I still love watching it. I still think it's a thrilling movie. Yeah. It's a great adventure in space. This one... it has a bunch of problems of its own, but what it does right really balances out the things that I thought were missing in the first two, and it's still a shitload of fun with Jimmy T. Kirk and the Starfleet Ryderz.
An edit that's way better.
I hope if there's a long version on Blu-ray, I'm definitely going to watch that one again for sure. We'll definitely be here to get really high and watch it. And I know I'm going to like it more because I know what the fuck is happening, so I think it's going to be easier to, to get into what's going on. And I got to say... some dickhead picked the seat right next to me and James, and I was like, what the fuck? And so I couldn't vape in my seat. I had to go to the bathroom and miss like 5 minutes of the movie while I was vaping in the bathroom. So maybe I missed the scene when Kral was like, oh, Lieutenant Uhura, let me explain to you who I am and what I'm doing. But I asked James if I missed it, and he was like, I have no fucking clue it's happening either. So I know it's not just me.
Could be. I don't know. I wasn't having trouble following it, but... it took me a little while to get into it. Once I got on board, I was like, this is a B-plus version of the last two films.
I would give it a solid B. I don't know if it's in the plus range or not. I think after I see it a second time, I'll have a really good assessment. But I would give it a solid B for sure. Loads better than Star Trek 5, not even in the same league, Definitely nowhere near Star Trek 2, but I thoroughly enjoyed watching it. Do I like it more than the second one? Maybe I do. I'm not sure. The second one had a lot of strong stuff too, but I mean, I really liked it, and I like all three of these movies, so definitely go watch it. I think you will not be wasting your time checking out Jimmy T. Kirk and the Starfleet Ryderz. See ya. Oh, I have to unlock it again. I'll edit it after that.